Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. There's no sound, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Am I audible now?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Okay. So, yeah. So I was saying that he was always embraced by the Lord, and his bodily activities happened automatically, were performed automatically without his knowledge. And because of Vaikuntha Chinta, thoughts of Krishna, he sometimes cried, sometimes laughed, sometimes expressed jubilation, and sometimes sang loudly. And Prabhupada in the purport explains like relationship was Vatsalya, parental love. So Prahlad Maharaj was seeing his worshipable Lord as his mother. So he gives the example of how when mother goes away, child cries. When he sees mother coming, he laughs, and so on and so forth. So very loving affection. Then sometimes upon seeing the Supreme Lord, Prahlad Maharaj would loudly call in full anxiety. Sometimes lost his shyness in jubilation and began dancing in ecstasy. And sometimes, being fully absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, he felt oneness and imitated the pastimes of the Lord. Yeah, so here Prabhupada saying, feelings of Prahlad Maharaj were in mellow of Vatsalya, filial love and affection. As a child cries when left by his mother, Prahlad Maharaj felt that the Lord, when he felt that the Lord was away from him, he began to cry. Again, a devotee like Prahlad sometimes sees that the Lord is coming from a long distance to pacify him like a mother responding to a child. Then the devotee, without being ashamed to his surroundings and circumstances, begins to dance, thinking, here is my Lord is coming. Thus, the devotee in full ecstasy sometimes imitates the pastimes of the Lord, just as the cowherd boys used to imitate the behavior of the jungle animals. He does not actually become the Lord. Prahlad Maharaj achieved the spiritual ecstasies described herein by his advancement in spiritual understanding. So he was experiencing spiritual ecstasies which can be experienced at the stage of bhava and prema. So, sadhana bhakti. So there are three stages of bhakti: sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, prema bhakti. So sadhana bhakti has two aspects. One is called Chesta Rupa and the other is called Bhava Rupa. Or no, I can't remember the names exactly. So one is where we do devotion using our senses, which is more practical in terms of, mm, like sweeping the floor, cleaning the pots, or singing kirtan, doing japa, seeing the Lord with our eyes, etc. Now, all these are the devotional activities which are done by using the material senses. Though devotion itself is spiritual, um, so some of these activities also take shelter of the material senses. Now then, but this goes on till asakti, stage of asakti, and then in the stage of bhava, um, the emotions, spiritual emotions, are awakened. Of course, I mean these emotions are also there in earlier stages of devotion, but they are not very pronounced. But when the devotee enters the stage of bhava, then the spiritual emotions actually take center stage. And the devotee experiences various ecstasies, which are sattvika bhavas, thayi bhava, etc. So Prahlad Maharaj was in such an exalted state that he was experiencing all these spiritual ecstasies. Okay, so now we will continue. Verse 41. Kvachit utpulakastushnim aste samsparsha nirvrataha aspanda pranayananda salila miliktekshanaha. Sometimes feeling the touch of the Lord's lotus hands, he became spiritually jubilant and remained silent, his hairs standing on end and tears gliding down from his half closed eyes because of his love for the Lord. Utpulaka. Utpulaka means hair standing on end, and samsparsha nirvrataha, feeling great joy by contact with the Lord. Pranaya ananda, transcendental bliss from a relationship of love. Salila amilita ikshanaha, filled with tears, gliding down from his half closed eyes. When a devotee feels separation from the Lord, he becomes eager to see where the Lord is, and sometimes when he feels pangs of separation, tears flow incessantly from his half closed eyes. As stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shikshastaka, Yugaitam Nimeshena Chakshusha Pravrshaitam. The word Chakshusha Pravrshaitam refers to tears falling incessantly from the devotee's eyes. These symptoms, which appear in pure devotional ecstasy, were visible in the body of Prahlad Maharaj. So yeah, you're discussing this, devotee has to feel separation from the Lord. Yugaitam Nimeshena Chakshusha Pravrshaitam. Lord, the devotee cannot live without being in contact with the Lord for a moment. So he feels separation. Of course, I mean, we can start to think about this feeling of separation once our feeling of material separation ends. So today we are drowned in material separation. What is material separation? Separation from material things, material relations, everything material. Like my Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, has given a series of lectures on Vanaprastha, and there he was saying, why should devotees leave home? Because they are used to saying, this is my room, this is my chair, this is my bathroom, this is my soap. So there is so much of attachment, right? And because of that attachment, we feel material separation. So, for example, if we are not there in our house for a few days, we come back and home sweet home, which is just that material separation because of intense attachment to material things. Now, only once when this material attachment goes down can there be an increase in spiritual attachment. And the first stage of spiritual attachment is attachment to devotional activities, Shravanam, Kirtanam, etc. So we have to develop attachment. And not that we do it out of vaidhi, out of just rules. Because Shastra is saying, do this, okay, I'm doing it. That is vaidhi bhakti. But when we do spontaneously and develop some attachment towards devotional service, so that is the first stage, which is why yesterday I was saying that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave us this, this Sankirtana movement, which can help us transition from material attachment to the first stage of spiritual attachment, which is attachment to devotional activities. Then at a stage of asakti, the devotional attachment to devotional activities converts into attachment to Krishna. So till then we might not have so much attachment to Krishna. Everybody has some attachment to Krishna, but the attachment is more towards devotional activities. And then as we make progress, then we develop our attachment to Krishna. When this attachment to Krishna increases to such an extent, just like we have experienced material attachment and hence material separation, that intense attachment to the Lord results in the devotee feeling separation. So this is a very, very exalted state of devotion. Mm. And when a devotee experiences this separation, obviously he cries because the Lord is there, not there with him. Mm. So, like I've been saying last 2, 3 classes, that we have to aspire for these emotions. These. It's not easy. It's not easy to get to this stage. Okay, so we have to really develop intense hankering for this, saying that, I want to reach this stage. Just 1 second.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, we've lost.
No. Just
Lord.
try past. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So this feeling of separation. So we have to reach those stages, and like I was saying, these spiritual emotions are not easy to come by. Which is why sometimes when we talk about following rules, regulations, etc., the idea is actually without following those rules, regulations, without controlling our material attachments, we can't come to this stage of feeling separation from Krishna, experiencing spiritual emotions and all that will not happen. So we have to desire for this. We have to have, see, if we don't have, if these things don't appeal to us, then least we can say is that we are unfortunate. But then we should remain in the association of those devotees who have attachment to these things, and slowly that by their mercy, hopefully we will start, these things will become important to us at some point of time. And which is why repeatedly reading Srila Prabhupada's purports, Srila Prabhupada is, done magic in his purport. So naturally, he pulls us out of the first stage of material attachment just by seriously, contemplating his instructions in his purports. We can very easily come out of the material attachment. And then when we hear purports like this, we should feel. When we hear verses like this, where Prahlad Maharaj is experiencing, highest stage of spiritual emotions. Of course, for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, this is not the highest stage because Prahlad Maharaj was in Vatsalya Bhav, but still is very, very exalted state. So pure devotional ecstasy. He was experiencing pure devotional ecstasy. Yeah, and to understand some of these things, we have to also come to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So which means Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Nectar of Devotion, and then Chaitanya Charitamrita, where we will start understanding or hearing, not understanding, sorry, hearing about the spiritual emotions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So a lot of work is there. Okay. So उत्तमश्लोकपदारविन्दयोर्निषेवया किञ्चन सङ्गलब्धया तन्वन् परान् निर्वृतिम् आत्मनो मुहुर्दुस्सङ्गदीनस्य मनःशमं व्यधात्. Because of his association with perfect unalloyed devotees who had nothing to do with anything material, Prahlad Maharaj constantly engaged in the service of the Lord's lotus feet. By seeing his bodily features when he was in perfect ecstasy, persons very poor in spiritual understanding became purified. In other words, Prahlad Maharaj bestowed upon them transcendental bliss. This is so amazing. Like you're saying, so if even if we are poor in spiritual understanding, we become purified when we see devotees in such ecstasy. Actually, I forgot to say, Srila Prabhupada once he had commented about the quality of Sankirtan that has to happen in ISKCON. He said that while Kirtan is going on in the temple, there should be a few devotees who have been assigned this service of mopping the floor, which is now getting filled with the tears of ecstasy from flowing from the eyes of the devotees who are dancing in Kirtan or who are singing in Kirtan. Which means the expectation is that by this singing of by getting involved in the Nama Sankirtan, we should actually reach a stage where there will be tears flowing from our eyes. So and Prabhupada actually created ISKCON for this, right? So the devotees can come to this stage. And then others who are poor in spiritual understanding, just by seeing them. So somebody comes to the temple and then somebody is in, all devotees are in spiritual ecstasy in Kirtan, and then they get purified. Of course, it's not that if, individuals are there and then they start showing spiritual emotions. No, that is not appreciated. But yeah, when there is Kirtan going on and so many devotees are around and, then, you know, one after the other, if devotees start crying, nobody will be singled out saying that, oh, he's at such an exalted state. Right? But we should have so many devotees in experiencing that kind of perfect ecstasy, which is what Srila Prabhupada wanted. So here, this verse is saying that, when we have devotees like that around us, we are so fortunate that even if we are poor in spiritual understanding, we become purified. And then, like it's saying, Prahlad Maharaj bestowed upon them transcendental bliss. So once we get purified of material contamination, then we can experience transcendental bliss. And what is this contamination? Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, Raga, Dvesha, what is that? Vita, Raga, Bhaya, Krodha. Raga, Bhaya, Krodha. All these anarthas. So once we are purified of all these anarthas, then only we can experience transcendental bliss. Again, this requires us to get over anartha nivriti and come to the stage of nishta. Then we can think about these things. And getting over anartha nivriti means getting over our material attachments. Again, because of his association with perfect unalloyed devotees, now it's not mentioned who these devotees are. We know that he had the perfect association of Sri Narada Muni, but this verse is saying he had association of perfect unalloyed devotees. So there are others who they are not clear. But these unalloyed devotees had nothing to do with anything material. So Prahlad constantly engaged in the service of the Lord's lotus feet. Again, constantly engaged. What is constantly for neophyte devotees? For neophyte devotees, satatam means every day. Okay, because it's not possible for them to do every moment. So initially for us it is Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Nityam means we have translated it as read Bhagavatam every day. That is the initial stage. But actual Nityam is constantly, every moment. So again, one has to have time to be able to do this. So again, we go back to Stri Dharma, Purusha Dharma, Varnashrama Dharma, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, all these designed so that we can get the time that is required to be able to constantly engage ourselves in the service of the Lord's lotus feet. And service of Lord's lotus feet doesn't mean that we are just doing Archa Vigraha Aradhana, not just deity worship. Of course, that is also one of the Angas, but Shravanam Kirtanam for us. Apparently, Prahlad Maharaj was placed in circumstances in which he was always tortured by his father. In such material conditions, one cannot have an undisturbed mind. But since bhakti is ahituki apratihata, unconditional, Prahlad Maharaj was never disturbed by the chastisements of Hiranyakashipu. Can we imagine this? So Prabhupada is giving us a more practical context to this, saying that, okay, if we are just reading Prahlad's these emotions and what he's experiencing without seeing the reality in his life, then we might feel, oh yeah, Prahlad was such an exalted devotee. But he was more exalted because his material situation was very, very disturbing. Mm. But he had an undisturbed mind. He was fixed in in his devotion. He was never disturbed by the chastisements of Hiranyakashipu. On the contrary, the bodily symptoms of his ecstatic love for the Supreme Lord had turned the minds of his friends who had also been born in atheistic families. So we will hear about this. So Prahlad starts preaching in his class, in his school, mm, it, Asura school. Instead of being disturbed by the torments of his father, Prahlad influenced his friends and cleansed their minds. A devotee is never contaminated by material conditions. Devotee is never contaminated by material conditions. So we can understand that if we are contaminated by material conditions, we are yet to become a devotee. But the person subjected to material conditions can become spiritually advanced and blissful upon seeing the behavior of a pure devotee. That is the reason why it is so important to serve exalted devotees. Hmm. Okay. तस्मिन् महाभागवते महाभागे महात्मनि हिरण्यकशिपु राजन् अकरोद् अघम् आत्मजे. My dear King Yudhishthir, the demon Hiranyakashipu tormented this exalted, fortunate devotee, although Prahlad was his own son. When a demon like Hiranyakashipu, despite his elevated position due to severe austerities, begins to tease a devotee, he begins falling down and the results of his austerities dwindle. One oppresses a pure devotee, loses all the results of his austerities, penances, and pious activities. We have to be very, very careful. Sometimes we become blinded by something that we are trying to achieve and we end up oppressing a pure devotee. Then we lose everything. So we have to be very, very careful of Vaishnava Aparadh. Since Hiranyakashipu was now inclined to chastise his most exalted devotee son Prahlad, his opulences began dwindling. And the Lord had already foretold this, saying that when he troubles Prahlad, then I will come. So his opulences began dwindling. Shri Yudhishthira Vacha. Devarshayetadichamo veditum tava suvrata yad atmajaya shuddhaya pitada sadavehyagam. Yudhishthir Maharaj is surprised. Oh, best of the saints among the demigods, or best of spiritual leaders, how did Hiranyakashipu give so much trouble to Prahlad Maharaj, the pure and exalted saint, although Prahlad was his own son? I wish to know about this subject from you. So he is surprised, saying that how can Hiranyakashipu give so much trouble to Prahlad? Not only was he a pure and exalted saint, but he was also his own son. Purport. To know about the Supreme Person of Godhead and the characteristics of his pure devotee, one must inquire from authorities like Devarshi Narada. One cannot inquire about transcendental subject matters from a layman. Stated in Bhagavatam. Satam prasangan mama vidya samvido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kataha. Satam prasangan. Only by association with Satam, devotees, one can authoritatively understand the position of the Lord and his devotees. Bhavanti hrit karna rasayana. Hrit karna, heart and ears. Rasayana kataha, in like nectar of the katha of Krishna, Krishna katha. A devotee like Narada Muni is addressed as Suvrata. Su means good and Vrata means vow. Thus the word Suvrata refers to a person who has nothing to do with the material world, which is always bad. One cannot understand anything spiritual from a materialistic scholar puffed up with academic knowledge. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktya Mama Vijanati. One must try to understand Krishna by devotional service and from a devotee. Therefore, Yudhishthira Maharaj was quite right in wanting to learn further about Prahlad Maharaj from Sri Narada Muni. So, whom we have to inquire, authorities. Also, elsewhere it is said we have to hear from like-minded devotees or associate with like-minded devotees. And I've discussed this briefly. Like-minded means similar mood of devotion. Like we have different devotees have different moods. Like we see the moods of various initiating spiritual masters, they're all different, right? So a disciple should be aligned to the mood of the Guru, Vaishnava, from whom he is going to take Diksha. And how do we know if we are aligned? Is only when we hear from them. So that is the reason why before initiation one has to hear. And they have to understand if their mood of devotion is aligned with that of their Guru, because then they can contribute in serving. They can serve the Guru in that way. Right? But if we take initiation without hearing, then we don't know what is the mood of our Guru. Then we are in our own world. And then we will not experience Yasya Prasadat Bhagavat Prasadu. And we might also end up doing Guru Ravagya because Guru might expect us to do something, then we are not ready to do that because we are not surrendered fully. Because we never heard. So we have to hear from authorities, right? And only then we can hope to make progress. Putran koolan swan pitara putra vatsalah upalabhante shikshartham naivagam aparo yatha. A father and mother are always affectionate to their children. When the children are disobedient, the parents chastise them not due to enmity, but only for child's instruction and welfare. Now, again, this also is forgotten in today's time and age. Parents chastise children because they are frustrated, mm, because they don't have time and children are pestering them. This is the mood of parents today. Why? Because husband and wife are working, nobody has time for children, their welfare. But actually, what is the role of parents? Is to actually correct their children, give them right instruction, show them the right path, for which one first has to have time, patience, love, all these things. Nowadays, I see parents chastising children almost seems like enmity, a get lost kind of mood. That's not our that's not the responsibility of parents. So yeah, important. How did Hiranyakashipu, the father of Prahlad, chastise such a noble son? This is what I'm eager to know. Yeah, we all see mini Hiranyakashipus when we get angry at our children. Kimutta utan vashan sadhun stadrishan gurudevatan yetat kautuhalam brahman asmakam vidham prabho pitu putraya yadvesho maranaya prayojitah. Maharaj Yudhishthir further inquired, how was it possible for a father to be so violent toward an exalted son who was obedient, well behaved, and respectful to his father? O Brahmana, O master, I have never heard of such a contradiction as an affectionate father's punishing his noble son with the intention of killing him. Kindly dissipate our doubts in this regard. In the history of human society, an affectionate father is rarely found to chastise a noble and devoted son. Therefore, Maharaj Yudhishthir wanted Narada Muni to dissipate his doubt. This we end the fourth chapter of the seventh canto. Chapter 5. Sri Narada Vacha. So all these questions by Yudhishthir Maharaj, now Sri Narada Muni actually starts answering them. Paurohityaya Bhagavan Vritah Kavya Ilasuraihi Shandamarkau Sutau Tasya Daityaraja Grihantike. The great sage Narada Muni said, the demons headed by Hiranyakashipu accepted Shukracharya as their priest for ritualistic ceremonies, Karmakanda. Shukracharya's two sons, Shanda and Amarka, lived near Hiranyakashipu's palace. So Prahlad Maharaj starts recounting. The beginning of the life story of Prahlada is recounted as follows. Shukracharya became the priest of the atheists, especially Hiranyakashipu, and thus his two sons, Shanda and Amarka, resided near Hiranyakashipu's residence. Shukracharya should not have become the priest of Hiranyakashipu because Hiranyakashipu and his followers were all atheists. A Brahmana should become the priest of a person interested in advancement of spiritual culture. The very name Shukracharya, however, indicates a person interested in obtaining benefits for his sons and descendants, regardless of how the money comes. A real Brahmana would not become a priest for atheistic men. Tauragna prapitam balam palladam naya kovidam pathayam asatu patyan anyamscha surabalakan. Prahlad Maharaj was already educated in devotional life. Why? Because he heard from Sri Narada Muni in the womb of his mother. But when his father sent him to those two sons of Shukracharya to be educated, they accepted him at their school along with the other sons of the Asuras. Yat tatra guruna proktam shushuve nupapatha cha na sadhu manasa mene swaparasad grihashrayam. Prahlada certainly heard and recited the topics of politics and economics taught by the teachers, but he understood that the political philosophy involves considering someone a friend and then someone else as an enemy, and thus he did not like it. Politics involves accepting one group of men as enemies and another group as friends. Everything in politics is based on this philosophy, and the entire world, especially at present, is engrossed in it. Of course, this should not enter ISKCON, but unfortunately, this happens. Why does it happen? Because we are not on the transcendental platform, because we are still doing devotion on the platform of modes. There are devotees who are doing devotion in the mode of goodness, while being in the mode of goodness, in the mode of passion, ignorance, etc. So these kinds of things which should not enter a Vaishnava community, Vaishnava society, enters. And Prabhupada is saying the whole world is engrossed in it. Politics. One group of men are friends, another group of enemies. The public is concerned with friendly countries and friendly groups are enemy countries and enemy groups. But as stated in Bhagavad Gita, a learned person does not make distinctions between enemies and friends. Devotees especially do not create friends and enemies. What is the create? A devotee sees that every living being is part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, a devotee treats friends and enemies equally by trying to educate them both in Krishna consciousness. Now, this is very important. Most of us, when we come into Krishna consciousness, we kind of give up material association. We give up our relatives, friends, etc., which is okay because at that time we need to be protected. We don't want to expose ourselves to infection, right? Like somebody is unwell, then they are careful not to expose themselves to infection. And we don't want to expose ourselves to material infection. So we kind of protect ourselves by secluding ourselves, by being away from these material relatives and friends. But as we make progress in devotion, we have to get back in contact with all these people, not seeing them as friends, enemies, relatives, etc., but just seeing them equally, just so that we can educate them in Krishna consciousness. It is very important because otherwise we will remain on a lower platform of devotion, which is not samadarshinaha, not seeing all jivas equally. Of course, atheistic men do not follow the instructions of pure devotees, but instead consider a devotee their enemy. A devotee, however, never creates a situation of friendship and enmity. So we should never create this. Although Prahlad was obliged to hear the instructions of Shanda and Amarka, he did not like the philosophy of friends and enemies, which forms the basis of politics. He was not interested in this philosophy. Okay, so I think we'll stop here because now this one more episode will happen with Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu. Okay, so I'll stop here. If there are any questions, comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu Pranam.
Hare Krishna Pranam Mataji.
Prabhu, in sadhana bhakti, you said there are two stages. What are the names?
1 second. Let me look up. Just yesterday I was reading. Chesta Rupa. Hmm, Just 1 second. Okay, till then, if anything else anybody has. Where is this? Hmm. Okay, let me just stop the recording.